in the development space, in the sector can arise from social movements. I think we also, the recent finance bill conversations, a lot of NGOs were caught very much unaware. A lot of private sector companies. I think some of my previous presenters here have talked about Safaricom and how they found themselves in the receiving end. I don't know whether they managed it well, we will get there. But so you can remember we had End the Femicide movement, we also had the Reject Finance Bill, and a lot of companies were caught unaware. Now, we always have to do proactive the crisis management. Being reactive can really mess your reputation as a brand. And so how do we prepare? How do we ensure that we are proactive? You must have a plan in place. You always must have a plan. I think a lot of the bosses that we work with as comms people, they do not think crisis will happen. And so you just must be, you play the role of the advisor to your boss for there to be a plan. And a plan is about who will be talking, what are the holding statements, and all that. So you have to be proactive and not reactive. Some triggers of crisis in development work. I've had the pleasure of working in a lot of the development space. So some of the things that can always trigger is like public sentiments shifts. And movements like End the Femicide demanded action from both the government and NGOs. A lot of NGOs were caught unaware. Government policy changes. Think about finance bill. It was a policy issue, and their pricing, happened. So that can also lead to, can trigger a crisis. And then, case in point, some NGOs were criticized for not taking a public stand against the oppressive government policies. One of the examples that have been given here is like, Safaricom. Them being told that they are providing information about people. So, crisis management in social movements, there are the stages. So there is the pre-crisis, there is the crisis, and post-crisis. In the pre-crisis, what a company should do is to really monitor the engagement movements, look at what is trending. Are you likely to find yourself, in the receiving end? And so you engage with the community leaders, talk about the scenario planning, prepare for various outcomes, e.g. the backlash. You can receive a lot of backlash. Then at the crisis, you need to be very swift. You need to be empathetic in your communication with the public and stakeholders. Address misinformation immediately. So sometimes you will do it and it leads to more backlash. So you just have to be prepared. In post-crisis, you look at support community recovery, you conduct post-crisis reviews and plan for the next one. It's always a process. Can companies be really fully prepared for crisis? I don't think so. I don't think there is a company that can say that they are really prepared. But it is a continuous process. Key elements of a crisis communication plan for development work: dedicated crisis team. The team must be involved. The top person. Remember, the top person has to be the one who is the spokesperson. So the CEO, the MD, and all that. So, and the communication team has to be part of it. Sometimes legal team, if your company has got a legal team, so they have to be part of that. So collaborate with the staff, the legal communication teams, and all that. Real-time monitoring. You use tools like Hootsuite. There are things like Brand Watch and all that. So you can be able to monitor a public sentiment for your company. And example, NGOs caught off guard by public outrage during the Reject Finance Bill. We were lucky not to be mentioned. We were prepared though. Crisis messaging, prepare holding statements focused on human rights, accountability, and support for affected communities. So, building a crisis-ready culture in NGOs and development work, empathy and transparency. I think that has been repeated by almost every speaker today. Empathy, transparent, build trust by being open about organizational policies, especially during social movements. Training on social sensitivity, that's part of building a crisis-ready culture. And community engagement, work with grassroots movements. Talk to your community, talk to your beneficiaries. A lot of NGOs work with communities because it's about development. So ensure that you engage the community, be empathetic with them. Let's look at a case study. Remember the End Femicide movement and the NGO responses. So protests erupted in 2021, and it was about gender-based violence. And some NGOs were criticized for not taking, a strong public stance, or others were criticized because they delayed to ever release any statement with showing support for the movement and all that. Proactive approach, NGOs like Equality Now, they released immediate statements supporting the movement and offering legal assistance. Social media campaigns to show solidarity and engage directly with the protests. The organizations that aligned with the movement received support. Those who did not, even if it was silence, they did not receive support. In the NGO world, a lot of control is by the donor. And sometimes, even as a comms people, we want to support a certain movement, but the donor does not want their brand to be associated with anything that is not related to the work that you are doing. And so it is always a very big crisis when you are there, comms person, you have your plan, you want to be able to support any movement, but you cannot. So it is always very, very tricky for comms people. Let's look at another case study. Remember this Airtel advert? We ain't snitches. Remember that? So the finance bill. And Airtel used the opportunity to actually really get a lot of attention because Safaricom was on the receiving end. Safaricom was said to be providing people's locations, tampering with internet, and so Airtel started the campaign that we ain't snitches. The lessons here is that delay in response is what really made the public very, very angry about Safaricom. Later on, the CEO made a video. I don't know whether they really handled it well. The video made the crisis even worse. The comments, everything, and I really could empathize with the comms people who were working on Safaricom at that point. Tools for managing crisis in social movements. So there are social listening. So tools like brand watches, again, as I mentioned, so you track the sentiment around social movements, use community-based organizations to get really early insights. And the response, crisis response, you prepare holding statements, again, and only authorized people should offer them, the statements, not any other person. Collaborate with partners like Oxfam, Action Aid for coordinated responses. These are companies that are very pro-communities. So in terms of, when you have an issue, they are good companies that you can be able to collaborate with and be able to give responses. Engagement dashboards, you use centralized community feedback and responses in real time. The thing with crisis management communication is really the speed of execution. How fast do you get the message out there and ensure that you are empathetic? Let's look at collaborating with stakeholders. So, community leaders, again, as I said, NGOs, a lot of development work is at the community level. So look at them, partner with activists and local leaders to understand the movement demands. Example, gender-based NGOs collaborating with end femicide protest leaders to form a united front. Government relations, very, very key for companies when they are dealing with crisis. So balance working with government while staying true to your organization's mission. I think one of the things, like right now, I don't know there is anybody who wants to seem like they are collaborating with the government of the day. So you have to really balance your messaging. You have to balance your messaging and ensure that you are working with the right partners. Internal teams, you ensure that staff are aware. Like, you always have to make statements internally. Every staff member needs to know what is it that we are dealing with and what is it that I can comment on. Every time, the sort of holding statements for me I make is, I tell you, you receive this call, and then especially the front office people, because people will make calls, right? Journalists will want to make cold calls and all that. So you tell them, this is what you will say. We are aware of 1, 2, 3. I am not authorized to comment on this. Please allow me to be able to direct you to our comms manager, who can be able to offer more details. Because the comms manager and the CEO are the people who need to be extremely utilized during crisis. So there are best practices. So again, swift, empathetic responses. Just don't allow the company to delay in really responding. Community-centric messaging, ensure that the message reflects community values and concerns. It's not about your company that much. It's really about the community, and you want to show empathy with the community. Media engagement. I'm a former journalist, and I usually feel like media actually makes crisis worse for companies. But you just cannot avoid them. So you have to really actively engage with the local media, international media, the contacts that you have. Get some people who will give positive messaging at that point for you. Some of the ways that I've done with most of the places I've worked is I try to hold media round tables from time to time, just so that I have a very good list of editors, journalists, reporters, and all that. Media, you cannot avoid. You just can't avoid media during crisis. Challenges in managing crisis in social movements. So balancing neutrality and advocacy. Every organization out here wants to, they want to be seen in a certain way. So when you are, working with development organization, sometimes there is issues of even funding, but you just have to stay neutral at these times. Okay, rapid escalation. I think social media can, what Gen Zs have shown us is that things can go south pretty fast. And so sometimes things will escalate within no time. One moment, case in point, what Safaricom was going through, within no time, backlash, and things got really worse within no time. Legal and ethical constraints. Sometimes NGOs working with sensitive issues like human rights must carefully navigate local laws, because you also don't want to find yourself in the receiving end with the government of the day. I think recently we are talking about, was it Ford Foundation? Oh, they are behind the protest and all that, and an investigation was opened for them. You don't want to get in issues with the government of the day. Post-crisis, learning and recovery. I think every time a crisis, you've come through, you've recovered, you have to do an evaluation. Evaluate and ensure that you look at how did we respond, and all that. Engage community leaders and stakeholders for feedback. Ensure you get feedback from your stakeholders, and then implement policy changes. I think one of the things that I really find very interesting is that most development organizations will want to just throw things under the carpet, and they don't want to look at, okay, what is it, a policy issue? Is it like how do we ensure that we are never going to find ourselves in these issues again? So you look at the policies. So and again, you as the comms person, you're the one to really advocate and push your boss, your CEO, to address the issue, not to just throw things under the carpet. And then you have to rebuild trust again. Because after a crisis, your brand is in tatters. So how do you ensure that you publicly share the actions taken, post the crisis, ongoing commitments? You say we are committed to doing this and all that. So final thoughts: in the development space, crises are inevitable. When you are working in social justice or policy advocacy, crises are inevitable, and that's why I was telling that guy over there that for me, I actually love crisis because I get free media attention. Being proactive allows organizations to align with community values, maintain stakeholder trust, and it is all about trust and your reputation. How do clients trust you? What is the reputation out there for your company? And takeaway: always be prepared to stand with the community. I think when we are talking about social movements, it's always public outcry. And so how do you ensure that everybody knows you are standing with the community? And so that is the end of the presentation.